Hello everyone, welcome back to the Speculation Station. I am your host, Captain Cheddar. Today, I am joined by TxHunniBadger. Say hi.
Oh,
Also, Bodhi.
howdy.
And our guest today is none other than Admiral Tater.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we're going to be recapping a little bit of Chicago Uprising that happened this weekend in Chicago. It's a little bit different than all the other tournaments because this is the first non-grand tournament that has had a large turnout since last year's Worlds. So we're going to recap it a little bit and then talk about the structure of it because that was also a little bit different. So let's go ahead and jump off right into it. I'll start asking you some questions, Admiral Tater, if you don't mind.
You got it.
All right. So this was the largest non-GTD tournament since Worlds and the largest non-AMG sanctioned tournament, I think, maybe ever. So how did you guys generate such hype around the tournament?
So I think baseline Chicago has an extremely healthy Armada community to where at their local store there's almost like a lottery to get a chance to have a table to play because there's so many people trying to participate. So that helped a lot. And I think the most surprising thing about Chicago Open was we were going to have more people, but like a good half dozen to 10 of the locals who play all the time just had incredibly good excuses to why they could not be there. People like Nick Latrenta, who won Nova this year, I think, was like in South America or something, out of town. But the other part of this is Adrian, Adrian Valerie. He's like the community lead there in Chicago, as far as the players go, and he did a lot of work to talk about the upcoming tournament for a few months and build steam. And they got a really good new player onboarding system there to where there's so much Armada product that exists in the wild because the game was in print for 10 years. So if people want stuff, there is stuff to give out. And a lot of the people in the community are just okay with, once somebody leaves the game, they sell it to the next person coming into the game. And then the next part was Ion Radio is based out of Chicago, Ken and John. And so they're also able to build a lot of hype around the idea of it. So with all those things combined, and then layered on top, price support, they had a really good relationship with me, and I can make some pretty good prizes to generate pretty good hype to come to things, especially for new players. So I think a lot of problems a lot of older communities have is people have everything, and that includes altar cards. People have stacks of them from collecting over the years, and so new shiny stuff isn't as appealing. But at Chicago, part of the participation awards we did, like shiny shield dials, and seeing people open up those things and immediately not have ships with accessories, they were able to put those dials on when they got there. And so for new players, that stuff is really exciting and builds hype. So it was just like a really good, perfect storm of things coming together. And not having the Worlds ticket didn't hurt it because people were coming to play for the fun. And then the next part of why it was so good was because if you did not make the top 8, the following day had multiple side events. So one was the Monster Truck tournament where you had 800 points, no smalls, right? Bring out your Executor 2s, have a good time. And the other event is the Who's the Boss, which people love. That was a huge hit. The mystery of what Admiral you're going to get to combo with your fleet that you brought is a ton of fun. And so, Adrian and John Keen put together lots of really fun side prize support that they collected over the year, like Funko Pops, and I think my favorite one was whoever purchased the most concessions got a Jabba the Hutt pin, which was really funny. It's Jabba the Hutt, yeah. And that was another part. We had food on site, and so your ticket included if you space it out right, each day you could get like a hot dog and a bag of chips. Uh, and not leaving is really convenient. And then they also had a really good venue, and John was responsible for that. He had a good relationship with a local public library in Maywood, and it had this top floor that they used to do. I think he said Netrunner and uh, X-wing tournaments in, and it's this beautiful space with like skylights and big windows with tons of light. Um, and then of course, we had Ken able to stream the whole thing, and we had a lot of people tune in to watch, and that was really fun. So, yeah, I think all those things combined, just built it up. We had so many new people. I would say probably over a dozen that it was their first real tournament, if not more, which was really cool to see. Like they were all so excited. Um, like I got to tell somebody, how to fly Jerry on an SSD, and I think that was my favorite part because once I showed him how the SSD moved across the board, a whole new world of Armada opened up in his eyes. So just stuff like that. I think that wraps up the answer to that question, though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have quite a crew up there to be able to put all this together, and then a lot of connections to help.
Yeah, it's a lot of people um, working together to make it happen. And if you've ever organized a tournament, it takes a lot of effort from everybody involved and like going over above and beyond of what somebody would normally expect to really pull things out. And so if you have like 4 or 5 people doing that, you can pull off a professional level tournament. Um, in my opinion.
Yeah, it always seems like when I'm watching on the radio's videos, they're always very polished and professional. It's something that like from an artistic standpoint, it's like uh I can appreciate it because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist.
Yeah, Ken is
Yeah.
locked in. He's locked in on that.
I will say it, not as much as a perfectionist whenever I'm doing my podcast over here. I have gotten to the point where I've stopped spending so much time editing and I just do a little chop and then send it out. I'm just happy with what I've got. But
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great still. So, I
thank you.
mean, I understand not wanting to edit. I don't edit myself. It is the worst. It takes so much time.
All right. Well, let's see. Something just a small question I wanted to add on to the end of that is you've been around for a while. What effect do you think prize support has on like a smaller tournament and bringing out players?
So yeah, so I said this a little bit in the first one, but newer players really like getting stuff. Uh, it's just part of the fun of it. So I think just having a little something for everybody uh, is ideal. And then what's most important to target is your players who don't have a lot of stuff. And then you need to remember the people who don't have a lot of stuff are not the ones winning. So it's your bottom. You want to do prize support like a bell, where the people at the bottom get a lot of stuff, right? Uh, and so that way they're encouraged to come back because even though they lost or whatever, they walked away with a bag of stuff and a lot of cool memories. I don't think your like standard monthly championship needs to have a ton of stuff. I think it's okay to have like a little bit at a time, like drip feed it out. But maybe for like your big like end of league season thing, like have some cool stuff there. And it doesn't have to be like Armada related accessories. People were like equally excited about like the Funko Pops. It's just something fun. You know what I mean? And Star Wars related, I would say, that makes things most exciting. So
Okay, cool. Excuse me. Uh, so most other regions, I would say, are not like Chicago, in the fact that the player base there is very strong. I would say. Actually, here in Dallas, the player base used to be rather robust, but uh, in general, in Texas, I feel like the excitement around the game has kind of died off after the World's announcement, where the AMG announced that they're going to quit the publication of Armada. So, what do you think is the best way for us to emulate your success that you guys have seen in other regions?
Yeah, that's a good question. People ask me that a lot. And I think it just comes down to there's got to be at minimum two people that are consistent and show up every time at a consistent time and day and be an anchor and motivate their community. It's like managing a player community is the same as managing anything in life, to where, there's only a couple people who do all the logistical stuff, and then most people are just there to show up. And so you can't get salty at people when they don't want to do all that stuff, because your core player base just wants to show up and participate in the things that you've organized. And so places like Tri-State Armada with Steve over in New Jersey, they do a really good job of that. Utah with Jacob Thompson, he does a really good job of that. California in the Sacramento area, Machi and them do a good job of that. And I think that's just the real key, is just like consistency, and then an online network where people continue to talk to each other about the game throughout the week. And then if everyone in your community is dying and not having fun, you need to step back and figure out why they're not having fun playing this specific game. And it's because everyone's burnt out on 400-point competitive play, because there's like a dozen other ways to play this game. And if people want to play, there's some communities out there who exclusively play like sector fleet games and have never played a 400-point battle in their life. And that's how they enjoy playing the game, right? So, and I think that's the biggest thing. Ongoing communication, it's when you let people slip away and don't keep them engaged is when you lose everybody.
I think that's a great point. I've said that many times, that I think 400 points is the standard. That's where the game's balanced. But it does get a little stale with, especially when you don't have new things coming out, and so the meta is what it is. And if you're done, or if you're tired of flying against, the exact same fleet from the exact same players, I think the best way to shake it up and try something new is to have alternative formats, different points, different rules, restrictions on fleets, or reducing restrictions on fleets, cross-faction stuff. I definitely would like to see more of that. And we see it in some of the online tournaments. I just played in a Sector Fleet online tournament, and it was a lot of fun. But, in-person tournaments, it does get a little repetitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, if you're a veteran player in your community, don't run your optimized list. Bring something you still find interesting, and then don't specifically dunk on people. You don't have to win, and you don't have to play in a way that's like makes the other player feel bad. And this is something in all gaming communities that's difficult to do. But like, if you have a new player, let them win a couple games, because they're gonna want to play the game more once they blow up a ship out of the front of their ISD, and then coach them. Now, of course, you got to have players coming in to do that, and I'm not going to pretend that's not more difficult now. But I think everyone needs to realize and sit down and look at this. Every time somebody sells something on Facebook Marketplace or one of these Star Wars trading groups, somebody's buying it. So every time we lose a player, we gain a new one. And we need to continue trying to reach those players. And if you see somebody who's new online, ask them where they're at, and then go out of your way to find where you need to connect them. Because there's a lot of communities that I think locally, my favorite one is Cincinnati. I know of like a dozen players there, but it's really hard to get those people into one shop and play, but they all play. So it's just a lot of footwork. And, we're in this era of the game where there's no active development or product. So if you want to have a community, you got to do a lot of extra work that somebody who plays Warhammer does not have to do. But I think it's important to realize that people aren't buying these $700 Venators on eBay because they don't want to play.
I did not look at the price recently. Yeah.
Those people are motivated. All right. Absolutely out of their minds motivated to play. And that's a lot of our Louisville people are brand new and they didn't start getting into the game until like it died, like officially. And they're equally as excited to play. And we just have gobs of stuff locally. Like I could outfit, 4 players easily out of my collection, and that's what you should do.
Yeah. I think those are all good points. The let's see. I remember when I first started playing, I was in Southwest Missouri where there was essentially nobody except for the people that I had roped into the game. Uh, I had bought the core set and then I was like, "You guys should play this with me." And then I got them hooked after the first game. But then I moved down to Arkansas and I met Ben from aka Downsizing on YouTube, and I really liked what he was doing. Kind of like what you were mentioning, they changed up some stuff. We had some casual games where we played one another, and then we had tournaments where there wasn't a whole lot on the line. It was like mostly for fun. And then whenever the competitive ticket system came out from AMG, which I think there was a lot of hype around the beginning, and then by the end of it, I had that burnout, like you were saying, where every tournament was, I gotta, you know, swing for the fence and try and get this ticket. And so everyone else was feeling the same way, except for TxHunniBadger over here, who passed down like 5 tickets. Yeah. So I can see the burnout, and I actually have had people in my community ask me like to organize something that wasn't the 400 point normal.
Right. Because once everyone's doing these super competitive tournaments, you've left behind the lower 80% of your community. Because their intention is not to go and win the Las Vegas Open and clinch top 4 at Worlds. They just want to push plastic spaceships around.
Yeah, there is another format for Armada that's not from AMG or FG. I cannot remember the guy's name, but he was from Louisiana and he was running like a role playing Star Wars Armada group.
Beautiful.
And
yeah,
he did an interview with the Armada podcast like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I just was sucked into that podcast because I love the idea, and I love the idea of storytelling in Star Wars. So um, I would love to do that for people sometime, but it wouldn't be too difficult to get a group going on online either. Anyway, that was a little sidebar. The next question I had for you about the tournament was you guys decided to go with a 5 round tournament, which is um, following the guidelines in the tournament rulebook, which when they published that, I kind of pointed that out. But a lot of feedback I was getting, or the vibe from people, was, yeah, this is a 5 round. This is their idea of what a tournament should be, but no one's actually going to do this because we have our format and how it works. So you guys were able to try something new and do this 5 round format, but you did adjust it a little bit between day 1 and day 2. Why don't you tell me why you guys chose to do that, and then why do you think that was the right choice, or were there any downsides to it?
So I think everyone didn't like the rule system that was laid out for the latest GTs because it's just like not enough games to make the Swiss system work. And so that's why we don't restart it at day 2 and you make it cumulative. I will say I really, really like this format. And not because I won, because I got 3rd place at Gen Con with this format. But I think one thing I really, top of the list I like about it, is a lot of times when you're playing a normal Swiss tournament on the day that you need to qualify for the top cut, if you're at the top of the heap, you do not want to play a game dangerously where you need to get a lot of points. You both, as people at that top table, understand that you need to not fight and take a 6-5 and go to the next day and start fresh. With this format, you are forced in all games to perform at the absolute best you can and win as hard as you can, because you're keeping those tournament points to start again at the next day. So there's no playing it safe. You got to play your heart out each game. No questions, right? As I really like that. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people like 4-round days. That's very taxing on a good part of the players, and taxing on the people running the event. Because getting something going at 8 a.m. so that everyone is out by before 9 p.m. that night is a lot of work. And there's just a lot of more stress involved from the people judging, the people playing, and it stops becoming fun, in my opinion, after round 3. That last round, everyone's pretty tired, and endurance is starting to drop, right? So when you only have 3 rounds the first day, I feel great at the end of the day. And I go home and I wake up the next day and I don't feel dog tired. I feel ready to play at my best on that day too. So I think that's a really good part of the system. And then at day 2, you keep your points. So, and Armada is a game where, it's this 10-1 system, right? 10 points for if you win the best and 1 if you don't. So if you win pretty good or at the top of day 1 and you go into day 2, all it takes is you to lose 1 game, and then, you're going to be pretty in the hole as far as points go. And this also maintains the high level of competition, because people will get weeded out as you move into round 3 of the first day. And by round 4 and 5, you're playing your peers. And so everyone should have earned statistically equal. That's not the word I want to use. I think everyone has played a fair amount of players, because let's say you play a new player round 1, get a really good score, and then round 2, in theory, if you got a really good score against a new player, you should be playing somebody also good, right? And so on and so forth. So I don't think it really breaks the system, but I think just overall, everyone is just a lot happier during the day. I think I've answered that well. What are your cons you would like me to argue against?
Well, I think we can go around, and I would like to get some input from HunniBadger and Bodhi about their thoughts on the 5-rounder, and I think that by doing that, we'll pick up a couple cons maybe. But to start off, my first impression of it when I saw this in this format, I'm actually really a big fan of it, because I don't want to play necessarily 4 rounds in a day. Doing that and then going back to the hotel room feeling completely drained, and then having to wake up the next morning to go and try and do my best at a top 8 or something like that, it doesn't feel great. So being able to get some rest in and then actually enjoy my weekend is a big positive for me. One of the cons, I guess you could take this one way or another, but this means that submarining is much less of a thing. So if I take a hit, then I may end up getting weeded out pretty fast. So Bodhi, TxHunniBadger, do you guys have any input on this?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd like to hear what Garrett thinks the cons might be, because obviously he's the only one with experience in this format, and so he would be able to kind of speak on that better. But as far as I can see, I really enjoy. I think the pros outweigh the cons. The pros that Garrett was talking about, no coasting. When I played LSO last year, I got a 10 and then either a 10 or a 9 my first 2 games of the first day, and I was way at the top of the leaderboard. And then my next 2 games were 6-5, 6-5, 0 MOV. And because one, I just kind of toilet bowled, we didn't engage, and then the last round was just corner deploy and speed 0. And got me into day 2 and it gave me my Worlds invite eventually, but I mean that's not necessarily I think what people are looking for when they go to these tournaments. I do like that that eliminates that kind of aspect. I agree with what you're saying with the 4 rounds in one day. It can get tiring, especially so like Texas Open last year was 4 rounds and there was no day 2 cut. It was just 4 rounds. And so you had a lot of people leave after the third round because they knew they weren't going to win and they're like, well, I can either play a fourth round or I can get on the road and head back to Houston or Austin or get home at a decent hour. Um, and so if you just hold it to 3 rounds, you get it's not like too much. People don't get burnt out and they leave on a positive note instead of feel like they're missing out or feel like they have to stick it out for another round of play. I think the no submarining is actually a pro. I don't like submarining in these tournaments, but I like you keep the most competitive, highest scores at the top. They beat up on each other, and you kind of do a round robin with the top there. Um, the only con I can think of is you look at like this 5 round tournament compared to most 2 day 4 round then 3 round tournaments. It's just less Armada. I mean, if people are traveling and they're booking a hotel room and they're doing a 2 day tournament and um, yeah, it's exhausting, but at the same time, if I can play 7 games of tournament Armada, I'm really getting my money's worth out of that instead of 3 rounds one day and then I'm just going to go to my hotel room or maybe hang out with people or whatever. But um, if you do 4, then 3, you're getting the full experience.
Bodhi, do you have anything to say about it?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot that hasn't already been said. I do kind of want to reiterate or I guess touch on a couple of points. The biggest downside for me is just like Drew just said, and this is coming from someone who is a big fan of the 4-3 like tournament structure. Every tournament that I've ever played in has followed that structure, or at least major tournament. And I don't know, I personally have never really had too much of an issue with playing 4 rounds in one day, but I can chalk that up to my young bones, I guess. I don't know. I just want to play the most competitive Armada that I can, especially if I'm paying for a hotel and if I'm driving. Like my drive to Worlds was 10 hours, and if it was just a 5 round thing, like I don't know if I could do that. I want to go in knowing that unless I don't make the cut, which I mean, I guess that is kind of one thing is if you don't make the cut, you're getting 5 rounds compared to 4. But like I want to go in hoping, with the goal in mind of making day 2. One other thing, I guess, is the day 1 bit about it might not be the most competitive, especially if you get paired up against a new player. But having the cut to top 8 means that almost, if not everybody on day 2 is going to be a high level player. This can be a pro for some, and it's a pro for me. I want to play against other people at or around my skill level. Some people find it a little excluding, which I do understand, but a lot of tournaments, in fact, every tournament that I've seen will have some kind of day 2 side event. And a lot of them have really, really fun, like, side rules. For one would love to get the chance to play Who's the Boss at some point. But, I mean, that's kind of my main thing is overall, like, I do like some parts of the 4-7, or the 4-3 system. There are a lot of benefits of just doing 5 rounds. The biggest downside to me is that it feels like, I mean, the only reason that I was able to do well in some of the tournaments as a newer player was because of submarining. So I am a bit partial to that kind of thing. It's something that you can't really do in other tournaments. Like I play some TCGs. If you lose your first round, then you're going to get paired against people in the lower bracket. Your tiebreakers are going to be terrible. And depending on how many number of rounds in the event, there's a chance that you don't even make the cut. And that's one thing that I've always kind of idolized about Armada is sometimes you can afford to take a 6-5 or a 7-4 loss. In fact, in both day 1 and day 2 of Worlds, I started out with a 3-8, and I was able to come back from there. I was actually leading the pack going into the final round of day 2. I was, I think, like 3rd place out of all 36. Granted, I lost from there, so that's one thing. But I know I'm partial to the way things are, but I'm honestly not opposed to if this is the new format for tournaments. I would love to just try a 5-round thing. The only adjustment that I would make, and this is kind of my last point, is I wish that it was 3-3. If there's not going to be a cut or anything, just make it 3 rounds on both days. I feel like, if 3 rounds is the perfect number of games to play in Armada and 4 is too much for most people, I feel like 2 is too little. And I feel like there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to just get that 6th game in there, unless you're really pressed for time and space. But that's kind of all I got.
Yep, that's a good thought. I was also thinking about that, it being kind of a shorter day 2. It almost feels like the first day should just be 2 rounds if it's going to be 5 total. That way, the second day can have a lot more hype, and maybe the cut is a little bit bigger than 8 players. But the
only issue with that, I guess, though, is it will get to the point if people are carrying over scores where there's going to be a select few that just don't have a chance anymore, and giving them the option to play in a side event and just say like, hey, like at first I was like, hold on, why are they doing a cut in the Uprising tournament? It just did not make sense to me. But after looking at the scores at the end of day 1, I was like, well, yeah, after 2 more rounds, there's no way that some of these people are going to have a chance to even make it into the top 8 for, cooler prizes and stuff. So giving them the chance to, without being rude, say, okay, here's another tournament to play in. And that way I feel like everyone gets to have a bit more fun.
Yep. The only other thing I wanted to add was when you have no cut and you have this 5-round format, I think you have to be, I don't know if you're more wary of your matchups or not, because a lot of fleets, like let's say Squadless, would kind of not like to go against let's say Sloan 134, because then your tokens get stripped and you can get bombed, and then you can't really defend very well against it. But like that is just an example of one archetype versus another. So you kind of have to be very cognizant of what your archetype is doing, and then when you come up against something that's going to counter your archetype, like in the normal format that we've previously done with the 4 rounds and a cut, you could easily just say, you know what, I'm going to take a step back. You can have this 6, I'll take a 5, and we'll move on from here. But then now with this other format, you kind of lose that opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to take a pause on this one. We'll just, like, I'll quarter deploy, and then if I have to duke it out for a 5, then maybe a 6, that's okay. But yeah, you kind of have to be cognizant of the archetypes you're going to go against, and you won't be able to step away and avoid them as much.
Yeah. Okay. So I've written some notes here.
Can I add one real last?
Oh yeah.
So you actually reminded me of the main point that I wanted to make, which my least favorite thing about the 4-7 structure is having to play the same person that you played on day 1, especially if it's someone, like if it's a bad matchup for you. So basically in every tournament that I've played in that had a day 1 and day 2, except for Worlds. Actually, no, even in Worlds, I ended up playing 1 or 2 people that I played on day 1. And kind of in the same vein of like, I want to travel for a tournament. I want to play the most games of Armada that I can. I want to play the most games of Armada against new, interesting ideas. And while there is some fun in, hey, I know your fleet now, I'm going to try and play differently to counter it, I would rather just play against someone new altogether. And having just a carryover 5 or 6 round structure, that makes it so that you're not going to play the same person again. And I do really like that aspect.
Yes. I was gonna say that's one of my favorite parts was there's no rematches. You beat that person, you take your score, you move on, and then you don't have to fight that repeated battle, especially if it went poorly for you. But let's see here. I think one thing to keep in mind is these are tournaments that are not worlds, so maintaining the hyper competitive format at Worlds, where it's you have the grueling 4 rounds per day, and then the next time it's another grueling cut. I think that's appropriate because that is the best way to match players, and make sure the best player wins. This is for your more standard tournament. If you're going to do a 2-day thing, like your Grand Nationals or whatever, what they used to call them, or Grand Tournaments now. I think this is a really sleek way to do it. And it also maintains the competitiveness because the best people are going to be at the top. And I hear about submarining. And I think the reason submarining was possible, like you guys said, was because people did play safe at the end of day 1. And so if they're not getting a 10, and only getting a 6 instead, submarining is mathematically possible, right? Because you get sent back down to the lower rungs, you get matched with a baby seal, hit them real hard, bounce up 10 points. But if the people at the top are also getting 8s, your 10 points with your 2 points from round 1 or whatever is not going to get you there. I 100% agree on 3 rounds plus 3 rounds. I think the 5 rounds, well, for Chicago specifically, was because of time and the event space closing, right? I think 3 rounds of 3 rounds would actually be even better. And then, let's see here. And then Bodhi said this too. It's really important that if you do have a day 2 tournament, you have really fun and interesting alternative game modes. It's a necessity because people have to feel excited to go. People were more excited about playing in like Who's the Boss than they were in playing the top 8 next day, because it's much more relaxed at Who's the Boss, and at top 8 we're all sweating, right, trying to win. I think that's everything I wanted to say. Overall, I just really like it. Mostly because of I think my favorite part is people just aren't playing safe at the end to maintain points. And so everyone's playing the game as hard as they can. Everyone's getting good games in, and there's no rematches, generally. If you do 3 and 3, you might get into that zone though.
Okay.
6 rounds total.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that if you're doing 3 and then a top cut, but keeping your same TP, and then you're doing 3 more matches. I don't see how you avoid rematches, especially if you've already played 2 or 3 people from the top 8 the first day.
Yeah.
I think it gets a
Yeah,
little
that's a really
harder.
good point.
Do y'all have any kind of issue like that with the matchups where you play 2 or 3 people the first day and then just the system wants to pair you up again, or what was kind of the experience like that?
I would have to 100% make sure, but I don't think I saw anybody playing rematches.
I was actually checking, I was looking at the scores throughout day 2 to see if it was even possible with the top 8 cut, making it so, because if it was 6 rounds and there was no cut, then theoretically, you would just pair down, which I feel like then just becomes more of an issue. So I don't know. There would have to be some problem solving there if this is the system going forward. But to get back to the point, there was And I'm not sure if it was because we had two people, or they had two people in the top 8 drop, and so they ended up going down to 10th place.
Yeah, we
And
did have. Yeah, we did have 2 people who didn't play day 2, and so
Yeah.
9 and 10 got moved up.
But there was no possible configuration of rounds that would result in a rematch. But I wasn't checking for if the people who had dropped were in. So, but I think it still would have been okay, because theoretically, the people who had the higher scores at the end of day 1, the people they played would then have lower scores. So, unless someone took a 2 and then got 2 10s or something like that, then maybe they end up back in. But that would just the T4 would just pair them to different people.
Right.
The last thing I want to say to wrap up this topic is I think we're all kind of excited to give this a shot and give it a try. I'm definitely down to try something new in Armada. The only other thing about it that I was thinking of was this format may actually edge out some archetypes that kind of rely on the taking the 5s. I know sometimes, let's see, one archetype I can imagine is like a Kirsta Assault Frigate Squad Ball. I played against that several times where it ends up being a 6/5, and like they kind of rely on taking those either 1 or 2 times during a tournament and then making it to day 2 and then having a good day. So there may be another archetype I'm missing, but something along the lines of I need it. I'm probably going to end up taking a 6 or 6/5 a couple times, but I only need 1 or 2 good games to put me in day 2, and so like this format may actually edge out those to where they're not competitive, which is an interesting thought.
Funny enough, that
Yeah.
exact fleet made it to day 2, and I fought against it.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's just it all depends. I totally get what you're saying though. Like if your fleet can't win big, points wise, it's just not going to happen. So I think another part of that is this would encourage the changing of a meta, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Sure.
Definitely a different meta for a different tournament style. One last thing that I just thought of when I was, because I'm looking at the T4 here and seeing who played. And so far, I only see one person that made the top 8 who played multiple people also in the top 8 on day 1. Most people had at least one matchup, but he had 2. But the thing that I just thought of is a format where there are no rematches, it does take away a little bit of your agency. And what I mean is, if you matched up with someone day 1 and a 6/5 or whatever, and then they're at the top of the leaderboard and you're also at the top of the leaderboard, and y'all should play again, but because it's a continuing format, you don't get to play again. Now that person just has to beat you points instead of actually beat you across the table. And so whereas you match up the first day 6/5 and then you're tied going into the final round, but one of you has to play down because you've already played, you can't just 8-3 that person and then automatically win. You have to swing for a 10 and hope they don't get a 10. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I think I see what you're saying. I think if you did 3 rounds the next day with us only top 8, that would be more of an issue. You might have to do something like top 16 if you want to do 3 and 3.
yeah, or maybe even top 12. I don't know.
Yeah, some weird number to help alleviate. But yeah, 5 rounds, super fun, super recommend, super good for organizing things. I think is one big step.
All right. After this section, we wanted to have a little chat about your fleet, so Bodhi's gonna conduct that little part of the interview.
All right. So, Garrett, I was keeping a close eye on you throughout the tournament. And this was entirely selfish reasons because I knew you were coming to Osmo. And I was like, all right, let's learn his play style. How's he gonna get this fleet in there? And then you turn around and tell me yesterday that you're gonna fly some Rebel Pelta bullshit. So
But now you don't even know. I could bring Gar. A mystery.
Right. Well, okay, so this list looks a little bit familiar, but tell me about it. Tell me what made you decide to bring this list?
Yeah, so I watched Nick, Unskilled First Officer, play this at Worlds when I was commentating, and it was the most favorite thing I've ever seen flown. I've been trying to make the Providence work for a long time with things like Trench, and I had never made this combination of the Projection Expert Bomber Command Center hard cell, and that was like the missing piece of my puzzle. I don't know why I had never tried to make that specific thing work, but it's really important, especially the Bomber Command Center part. Because usually you rely on a lot of tokens from like parts resupply or whatever to make things work. And then so everything about this list is essentially the same, except he had the Vulture Ace who gives out intel, and I found I didn't like that because I generally just wanted my vultures to die, and so I didn't need them to move around. And I heavily rely on Dis T81 to snipe specific squadrons, like Anakin or Shara Bay, something that could be a serious problem, right? But the real trick of this list is this, the double defensive Providence with early warning systems and the thermal shields, and that is basically hard counters everything except for Patriot's Fist and Akbar. Because everything else in the game, right? If you have their pool and then take away another die, the most damage you're going to be taking is 1 or 2 points to your shields, which you can really sustain that much firepower over the course of the rounds and not die, even without repair commands. I think I only did a single repair command on my Providence the entire tournament. Everything else was always either navigate or squadrons. And then the real magic of this list is the objectives. And so I always took second if I could, because it has a 7-point bid. And the objectives, the most important one is the close range intel scan. And this objective is the one where if I roll an accuracy, I can spend that accuracy and collect a victory token for 10 points. While the Providence has intensify firepower and H9 turbo lasers. And so every single shot I take, salvo, front shot, side shot, at flotillas that I would never be able to hit, at ships I would never be able to damage, I always take shots. And you're always IF into a hit, H9 into an accuracy, collect your point. I'm always surprised when people take this. I don't think it's played very often, and so it's not like Fire Lanes where the other guy's going to collect hundreds of points, but you can really rack up a lot of points on close range intel scan, especially for the Republic or the Clone Wars, because they have salvo, and you can farm off salvo as well. So there's 3 opportunities, and sometimes 4, because I burn my salvo all the time because I have Grievous to get it back. And then, the Gazanti with TI-99 makes my vultures that are trash exceptional with the stupid counter 3. That worked really well. And then there's 4 hyenas with Bomber Command Center. And I have so many squadrons, I can tie up huge balls of enemy squadrons. Even if they have 8 or 9 as well, I can throw in the vultures, tie them up, and sure, kill them. Makes me stronger. Thank you. And then the hyenas are free to go bomb. And if you have a reroll with BCC, it's really good. And Pittix against 2 reds is not as good as those Pittix against 1 black. Probably math-wise, it's probably better to have the 1 black still. But, when people reroll most of my reds, it would either take, it from a crit to a hit or a double to a crit. It would very rarely would I end up on an accuracy or blank. And then the strategic value of killing your own squadrons with Grievous. I would sit there in glee when I saw somebody had Volt Scarus or Shara Bay, because I knew I could attack them. And players' inclinations when they're playing Armada is to collect points. And so it's why wouldn't I counter? but I want you to kill it. In fact, there was times I'd get frustrated when they wouldn't roll enough hits to kill my vulture, and I'd be like, I need this thing dead. Like, how could you fail me right now, right? And I would like ask them, like, do you have Torn Fire or anything that can reroll this? To like hope they would do it.
Wow, very manipulative.
Yeah, it's part of it, right?
Yeah.
So, but the Rune Hako token generation was invaluable because that's the only way you're getting tokens at anything except for Hondo. And so I would constantly, I'd have the 2 munitions or 2 Confire tokens on Rune Hako, and then at the beginning I'd queue up a Confire on like the hard cell, and take a nav token on the Providence, and then Rune Hako the Confire off the hard cell, and use that for IF starting at round 1. Because again, if I can go speed 3, get halfway across the board, I can line up a shot that doesn't matter and start farming immediately if they chose it. And 3 people chose, what's it called? Close range intel scan instead of Astro Tactics or Infested Field, because they were so worried about me having a dozen squadrons plus Exogords. I think really psyched people out. So, and they thought the close range intel scan would be a better situation for them. I think I've forgotten the question, but that's the list. That was how I flew it basically.
Well, you successfully answered half of the other questions that I was going to ask. Specifically, cool. the objective part was one of the things that really stood out to me, because just like you said, close range intel scan is not super common, but it's one of those things for the listener. If you see an objective that you haven't played against before, your opponent, especially if you know they're a good player, they have a plan for it, and this is one of them. Especially with that H9s there, every shot's getting it's 10 points, right? Or is it 15?
10 points. 10 points, yeah. And they add up quick.
Yes, they do. And each one gives you more points back than every vulture that dies, which is something that the fleet wants to do.
Absolutely.
And all of that adds up real quick. So there's just a couple other things that I wanted to go over real fast, and then Drew has some questions. But so the one thing that stood out to me watching your games was in the final round, you were playing against a Starhawk fleet, and you flew. So he had his Gazanti was stuck in the front arc of the Starhawk, and it was advanced gunnery.
Yeah.
So that thing was on its last legs, and it ditched its evade in order to live through one shot, but couldn't quite get out of long range. And so you ended up flying a hyena off the board to get the evade back, which was a really interesting gamble that I honestly didn't even think of when I was just like, well, this is just a dead Gazanti if the accuracy gets rolled. But getting that evade back, you sacrificed 11 points to keep 31 in play. Were there any other times that you had to do a little gamble like that?
Yeah. No, there was multiple games where I would specifically, if I was about to take a front shot from like a Star Destroyer into the Providence, the Providence is not invincible, so I would ditch, my braces for thermals, and then when I had the chance, activate and throw a squadron off the board so that I could regain that. But no, the last game was definitely the most exciting because, his Tycho was chasing me, and TxHunniBadger just made a really funny invincible joke in the chat you can't see, but yes, it is invincible. It only died one time during the tournament, but so yeah, no. So my Sea-Rock Gazanti is running at an advanced gunnery, Starhawk, and I'm terrified that Tycho is going to chase down my hyena. And I've never been more thankful for Speed 4 in my life. And I think Josh thought I was trying to save the hyena for points, but I was literally just trying to get it to the other side of the board so that I could throw it off, because I knew that Starhawk was chasing me. That game could have went either way, because I only got GR75 or the Gazanti out from just dice luck, right? Because he had Confire tokens, Kaken and Sholin, and some other reroll that I can't even remember right now where he got it from. But so many opportunities to potentially end my life, but getting an accuracy on a red is super hard. So that was a real nail biter. Another time was when I was facing the dual ISD list in the first round. He had an ISD2 and a Kuat, and I absolutely had to kill multiple squadrons just to stay alive because there was no way I was going to take 2 or 3 or 4 ISD front shots and survive. That was really nerve-wracking as well. And then I had to do the same thing against Nicholas Kolker's list. He had Martuk with his own Providence that was also built to the nines. And we had each other double arced for a couple rounds. And he didn't have thermals. He had ECMs and advanced projectors. And so I was doing this thing at the end where I was so desperate to survive. I would fly a hyena up the round before, and then at the start of the next round when I went, the hyena would bomb his Providence, and then I would fly it off the board so that I could get back my tokens that I'd lost the round prior. So yeah, no, it was pretty fun. It was a very fun strategy. Very, opposite way to play.
It's super thematic, and I wish there was more things, because Grievous is the only CIS commander that feels like he does something unique. All the others just do some kind of dice fixing or give you more efficient stuff, but Grievous really feels special.
Right. It's so fun to punish people for doing things that you should do, like killing your squadrons and attacking you, because if you attack me, I'm going to salvo you and get points off Close Range Intel scan. So no matter what you do, I'm benefiting.
Right. Last question from me. So I've flown this list once against one of my buddies' Superstar Destroyer list. It was he wanted to fly against Separatists to kind of see, because he's interested in playing the faction, kind of see how they work, and I figured this list would be a great example. One thing that I struggled with was with early warning system, and I kind of have this issue across different fleets. The Providence is a ship that wants to get in and get a double arc. And if you have a double arc, then having only one hull zone obstructed probably means that they can just shoot the unobstructed hull zone. Did you ever have any issues, kind of like, which hull zone do I choose? Obviously, early warning system is a very powerful card on the approach and when you're running away from the engagement. But did you ever have any issues with it when you were trying to get any double arcs?
Yeah, so absolutely. So at some point, right, it's not going to cover all bases. So I just had to make the choice. And against an SSD, it would be different because it's one ship. So no matter which side you choose, they could probably pick your side if you got it in your front, or front if you got it in your side. But most people I played against had multiple ships, right? So I would just put it in the side or front that he has more ships shooting at, was the math I used, right? So if they have like a CR90 or whatever flying around, I'm going to put on the side that CR90 is going to TRC me for him, and then take the front shot from the bigger ship into my front, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And then specifically against bombers, right? I just put it where his bombers can get to me.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, sweet. So Drew, you had some questions?
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions, was EWS on a double arc ship. So that makes a lot of sense. And then so EWS creates the obstruction, and with thermal shields, I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. You do thermal shields first, right? And then you take off the obstruction?
Yes, which is extremely advantageous.
So then a 6 dice pool goes down to a 2 dice pool. You're taking out 4 dice. Yeah, that's crazy. So this is the same list you flew at Gen Con, right? And you got 3rd place there back in
Correct.
August. What what did you learn flying it at Gen Con that helped you win this tournament?
Well, I think one a giant thing was Rob's list, who got third here, actually, is he had a boarding troopers, and boarding troopers. He boarding trooped me at Gen Con, I had made a huge measuring error where I was not distance 5 from the edge of the board to throw away my vultures to get back my tokens. And so this tournament, I was constantly measuring where the edge of the board was, so I didn't get stuck in that position. Because that was boarding troopers are like a giant middle finger in this game. Everything is going well until the other guy's like, "All right, boarding troopers," and then it hits the fan, and you're like, "Oh crap!" And Grievous is my mechanic against it, right? And so when I messed that up, I was cooked. There was no way I was going to get out of it. He didn't have any squadrons I could counter, and he wasn't going to give me any free kills by flacking them. So that was my big takeaway, making sure I was always in the range that I needed to be to make sure I can get back my tokens. And that goes back to you either need to fly across the board as fast as possible so that you're in range on distance 5 of his edge, your opponent's edge, or you're on the edge of the board. So I always started my Providence at speed 3 and boosted as far as I could, and then slowed down after I got to that range. Another thing I forgot to say about early warning systems is I was trying to be really conscious of where I navigated my ship so that I had an obstacle obstructing for me the other arc. That's not super easy to do, but I'd gotten some pretty good practice in with this moving the Providence, because it does not move well. But at speed 2 with a nav command, it moves very well.
Okay, yeah, especially with those two objectives where you can place, asteroid tactics and infested fields. You can place down Exegorse to help obstruct as well. That's a good strategy too. Did you find yourself using asteroid tactics and infested field Exegorse to kill your own squads to get back tokens?
Absolutely. I tried to. I was actually really annoyed. I had squadrons. I was fighting against a squadless fleet, and he picked my asteroid tactics, and I kept not getting my squads in the right. Like, I wanted him to land on the X-Course of the ships, and so I would keep accidentally overlapping he would overlap my squadrons, and I couldn't put him back in a way that would get me the kill that I needed. So I tried to do that unsuccessfully, but only one person ever picked my asteroid tactics. So I didn't get too much practice with them this time. Because they didn't want me to get back tokens from the asteroids as well as Grievous. So people were really conscious of that.
That's interesting, because asteroid tactics is immediately the one that my eyes snap to. That's the definite pick.
Yeah.
Especially because I usually fly squadrons, and infested fields is very, very strong, extremely favorable for the second player who knows how to move obstacles in the right way. And while asteroid tactics gives you the initial placement of all of the obstacles, you don't get to move them and fuck with the plan in the middle of the game. And so that's almost always the one that, if my opponent presents those two objectives, I'm almost always going with asteroid tactics.
Yeah, Royce really outplayed me at Gen Con against my asteroid tactics with his guy Pieta list or whatever. I was trying to take too much advantage of my asteroids, and like he knew he saw what I was trying to do with it, and just absolutely outplayed and outmaneuvered me with his Demolisher and ISD. So props to him for that. That's definitely my weakest option that people can take.
Yeah, it is a bit weaker, but it provides just enough that it makes it worth it.
Mm-hmm.
There's virtually no downside. It's just the upside is very slight.
Yeah, and you also get to recover more tokens.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I was actually going to ask about your match with Royce, because that was your only other loss at Gen Con, and you lost to the father-son 1-2 finish combo.
Oh, I know. They're good players. I like losing to them. They're very nice about it. You feel so good about yourself after you lose.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, Royce, I played against him yesterday or the day before, and that was the first time I've ever played close range intel scan. What was it called? Yeah, close range intel scan. He had a bunch of Vic 2s with decaps, and took that one just so I could hide behind the dust clouds with my peltas and bomb him
Yeah.
with my Y wings. So I think he took it out after that.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna cut off this section of the interview and then move on to the next section in a new recording where we'll talk about the tier listing of the Clone Wars squadrons. So we could do an elevation section for this section and the next section. What do you guys think?
Listen,
I mean,
I'm along for the ride. You just tell me what to say.
All right. Bodhi, why don't you go ahead and take us away, and then I'll go next.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about hyperspace rings because this is probably one of the coolest cards in Armada that like I've never seen on the table, and it had a little bit of a heyday back when old matchstick was a thing because his rogue didn't actually come into effect until he hit the board, and so you could deploy your squadrons a little bit farther out with scout, and then you could drop in matchstick afterward, and then he would be at distance 1 to 3 to give Seth Rogue. But without that piece in the game, hyperspace rings lacks a little bit. I feel like what might hold it back. So part of Scout is that you can't deploy at distance 1 to 5 of an opponent's ship.
Or squadron.
Yeah. Because you have to deploy a ship and then deploy your squadrons after, like you can't have squadrons be your first deployment. Your opponent can like put down a ship and then you're kind of locked out of a place on the board because of that. I don't know if it would actually make the card better, but either changing it so that you could deploy like the scout keyword lets you deploy squadrons without having a ship there first, or lowering the distance. I mean, obviously you don't want to just be able to pounce on them like right out the gate, but it just feels like such a huge limitation for a card that's already really niche.
So I have this really fun list that I played last year with hyperspace rings, and it was a Venator 2 with the hyperspace, and then I had 5 Peltas, and then the Deltakin axe and kickback, and then it worked really great every single time. First off, people are not super familiar with hyperspace rings, right? And so you get your Arc 170s out there, and sure, you're locked out on one side of the board if they like deploy in one spot. But at the same time, your Arc 170s are in the battle, and these things are tanks. So I also had a Pelta medical frigate with Ahsoka officer on it. And so when and then I had a matchstick, the new one with his relay ability. And so I would use the Pelta medical frigate with Ahsoka to relay through matchstick out to my Arc 170s. They would snipe at that range, and then by the time round 2 starts, they're now engaged. And then so I've shot, they moved in, they're engaged, and at that point, everything else in the fleet's moved up, and my Arc 170s are on their side of the board, and I'm at my target. It's kind of like flying like a decap raider, like where you decap and you move in closer, and then you fight. So that was my experience. I really liked them. I actually might have won a big tournament with it, but I messed up really hard against an SSD that Xantos was flying, and overlapped my Arc 170s with my vendor in the middle of the battle. It's a total disaster. But yeah, hyperspace rings, I love them. Actually, can't wait to use them again here. I think in the Kentucky Team Championship.
All right, cool.
Nice.
Well, just for future reference, you're not outlawed from like responding to anybody's comments or anything, so feel free to pitch in. My elevation this week is going to be the interdictor combat retrofit. Uh, I love interdictors, and I love victory class star destroyers, and the combat retrofit along with the victory 2 class star destroyer just don't get played. And the interdictor, just because you pay 3 extra points, the only positive is you get 1 extra flak. The actual adding to the red dice is actually a negative because you have a better chance of missing, and then you lose one of your experimental retrofits, which really sucks on the interdictors. So, in order to fix it, I think what I would do is I would just swap out the ion cannon battery upgrade for a turbo laser upgrade, and then if I had my way, I would add an additional officer slot, and I think then would be worth taking maybe over the suppression retrofit.
I love it.
Thank you. All right.
I'm in. I'm sold.
Okay. Drew, do you have an elevation for this week?
Do I think my elevation, I would elevate DBY 27 heavy turbo lasers. And I think the only change I would make is I know the turbo lasers in the name. I think I'd make it an offensive retrofit. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, it's used as a salvo. Maybe you could make it a defensive retrofit. I don't think it'd ever see any play. But I think if you just made it an offensive retrofit, it would see more play. Because then you're not giving up your offensive turbo laser slot of LTTs or XI7s or TRCs or whatever you want to run, but you can still use it offensively. I think where this would come in would be like the Venators that like to use it, the Starhawk, especially the one where you can take a second salvo title. I just don't really think that would make it too. You could put it on the Rebel Providence that has the 2 offensive retrofit slots. In the Cis class or the Cis faction. It's my elevation. Change DBYs to offensive retrofit. I think I've spoken enough.
My only issue with that is then you can't take flak guns, and I feel like those go hand in hand unless you have one of the few ships that has 2 offensive retrofits. Because like being able to add the black die on the salvo at medium range with flak guns and then set it to a double with DBY was one of the strongest things that old Anakin lists had, and you don't really see it as much anymore, or it's a little bit more niche, I guess, just because Anakin doesn't exist anymore. But the salvo builds that I see are still infringent on that combo, and a lot of ships just don't have the double offensive retrofit. Honestly, I really do like the idea of making DBY a bit more potent, but I don't know. That's the one slot that it makes the most sense, but it feels so hard pressed just because flat guns.
Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't think about flat guns.
I like the idea though, and I've had the same idea. And this is my personal this is my preaching moment. I think point defense ion cannon should be an offensive retrofit.
Finally, I'm so glad that like every time I bring this up to people, they're like, no, it needs to be more expensive. It needs to have charges. But if it was an offensive retrofit or it just said like squadrons only, so that way you don't like negate all of the black dice crit effects.
Yeah.
It's just so much more fair. Sorry, I'm like totally stealing your thunder, but
no, I think it solves so many problems. Because Gar can have it now, and it fits perfectly there, and you can go back to using other ion slots again because Pidix just crowds everything out of that space. But for my real elevation, I want the hard cell transport and battle refit to be command 2, so I can hold 2 tokens. That's my elevation. I just want to be command 2. I hate the command 1. It really gums up the works.
Yeah, it is almost exactly like a Nebulon, except for that fact.
Yeah, well, the Architans, the Gladiator, all those small base ships are command 2.
Yeah, I think the only reason they're Command 1 is because they kind of got shoehorned out of having a Speed Force small. I mean, if we had the ability to travel back in time and give Separatists a Speed 4, like a CR90 equivalent, and then the hard cells could be a Command 2. Maybe even make them a little bit cheaper. I feel like they end up, especially the battle refit, just slightly overcosted for a couple fleets that I want them in.
I don't know. Maybe that's dangerous territory because of TF and Martuk. So
yeah.
It's dangerous territory.
I don't know, but yeah, I like that a lot. It seems like it might be a downside for a new player, but especially because Trench is so cool, like getting that extra token slot.
Yeah, there's many times during even the Chicago Uprising where I was like, man, if I could just keep a nav token on this hard cell as a reserve to send to my Providence would be infinitely useful, but I couldn't do that.
Yep.
All right. Cool. That's going to wrap us up for this part of the podcast. Thank you for listening. If you could give us a like and subscribe on YouTube, and if you're on Spotify, you might be able to leave a comment. Check that out. All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.